Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Should You Play, our video solution to your gaming curiosity.
Today we want to talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which represents part 2 of a 3-part episodic retelling of the original PS1 Final Fantasy VII game.
The original released all the way back in 1997, we're getting old people. It is such a beloved game and the remake was perhaps the most desired remake of all time. It was certainly a brave undertaking since nostalgia can be a very powerful thing and fans of the original game are heavily emotionally invested in the characters, story and the world.
First of all, if you are new to Final Fantasy VII, then do not start with Rebirth. I don't care what the developers claim. Trust me, Rebirth is not kind to newcomers, and the story so far feature is just a short overview of the remake to jog people's memories. You will literally be jumping into a game halfway through a very complex main story, so you must start with the remake.
Full disclosure here, none of us have ever played the original game since we were both 6 at the time. Heather wants to play it but is terrified that it won't live up to the hype without the nostalgic component.
But I have read up on and watched lots of YouTube videos on the main story so that I understand what's happening.
Yes, that makes you an expert.
Yes.
Anyway, so we will be talking about Rebirth in its own merit rather than making comparisons. Anyway, there is a lot to cover guys, so let's start with talking about the story. I do hope that prospective Rebirth players have played Remake at least, but if not, here's a very, very general overview of the plot so far to get you up to speed. Basically, you play both games as ex-soldier turned mercenary Cloud Strife, who becomes involved with eco-terrorist group Avalanche at the request of childhood sweetheart Tifa Lockhart.
The group's aim is to stop the tyrannical militant Shinra Corporation from harvesting the planet's exhaustible lifeblood, which is known as Mako. Furthermore, Cloud meets Aerith in the remake, a florist with a target on her back due to being the last descendant of the Cetra, another word for the Ancients. Shinra believe that Aerith can lead them to the Promised Land, a place said to be overflowing with inexhaustible Mako energy.
In Remake, Cloud is mentally haunted by vivid recollections of a former soldier named Sephiroth with the greatest hair in the world, who is believed to be dead but revealed to be very much alive and poses a powerful threat to the world. Rebirth shows Sephiroth's descent from war hero to madness after discovering his own origins that we won't spoil here.
Rebirth introduces key moments and characters that direct the narrative flow and works towards filling in some story blanks, focusing on the actions of Sephiroth, character backstories and development, and demonstrating the consequences of exploiting Mako. We also find out more about those hooded figures with numbered tattoos on their arm, which again we won't spoil.
It's really hard to give a spoiler-free summary of the plot with so many different cogs turning in this complex storyline. The remake left much untold and posed more questions than answers. Thankfully, Rebirth provides some of those answers.
Some of those answers.
Yes, some.
Rebirth is a large departure from the dystopian cyberpunk metropolis of Midgar, where you are confined to in the remake. This represents only the first 3 hours or so of the original, massively fleshed out into a 40+ hour game. Whether this is a good thing or a bad thing is down to personal preference, but I personally will never understand why the remake exists, when they could have just made Midgar as a region in Rebirth. But that's a discussion for another day.
Instead, Rebirth's narrative takes place across 7 huge regions of the planet that greatly differ in landscape, affluence, culture and regional wildlife and chocobos. Firstly, just like part 1, Rebirth's graphics continue to be impressive, especially considering how they have combined realism with fantasy and anime. You can choose to play in either performance mode or graphics mode, and I have seen a few reviewers point out issues with graphics mode. We've not had many issues with it.
The only problem we had was that the introductory cutscene had epic stutter. We almost switched to performance mode since this literally ruined the game opening, but thankfully the stuttering stopped and never returned. There has since been a patch that I believe has resolved this issue anyway.
The only other issue with the visuals is that sometimes the action gets obscured by the environment, especially during battles. Not a massive issue, but it does break immersion and ruin our footage.
Other than those things, the game is genuinely astounding. So much heart and soul clearly went into its creation. I remember playing it and suddenly stopping to use photo mode to try and zoom in on the grass because it looked so good. I've not done something like that since Horizon Forbidden West, although Rebirth isn't on the same graphical level as that game, but still.
The world itself is semi-open since you do encounter invisible walls and you can't seamlessly travel between regions the same way you can in normal open world games. But Rebirth doesn't feel like a semi-open game considering the sheer size of each region.
To be honest, I genuinely prefer it segmented like this. Having each region a separate location with quests and other tasks contained within makes things feel more organised and manageable, because there is so much you can do in this game. It's incredible, but more on that later. The first place you get to see is Nibelheim, that was featured in the game's demo, and is used as a means to fill in some story blanks from the first game in the form of a flashback.
The flashback itself is actually great, and it shows Cloud as a bright-eyed, naive soldier looking for his chance to prove himself. The town is quite small and humble, and is where Cloud Strife and his childhood sweetheart Tifa Lockhart grew up. It's a nice introduction to the game, followed by a trek up a mountain to a reactor which demonstrates the beauty of the world that awaits you, and the improved combat system. Again, more on that later.
Once the Nibelheim flashback concludes, you snap back to the present in the European-inspired city of Kalm, where Cloud and the rest of the gang have holed up, reeling from the chaos they left behind in Midgar. The city of Kalm is gorgeous. It's a vibrant, reasonably affluent, beautiful city full of life, merchants, impressive architecture, and is a large place that you can get lost in. It kind of reminds me of Novigrad in The Witcher 3, but nowhere near as big. However, they have put a lot of detail into your surroundings in this game.
This includes the NPCs going about their day, where you can even see the NPC's situation develop. For example, there is a man with a suit carrying a bouquet of flowers waiting for his beloved to meet him so he can ask her to marry him. Later on, you can hear him stressing out that she is late, and even later on you can overhear his turmoil over his rejected marriage proposal and he got dumped instead. I personally love this kind of stuff in games, and Rebirth is full of it. Not the heartache, I mean the detail.
When you leave Kalm, you can't return for a while. Beware of story locking, it happens a lot in this game, but you get to explore the first region. The Grasslands looks exactly how it sounds. You are surrounded by luscious greenery, and the area is full of farms, wildlife, and has a distinct countryside vibe. It also has a swamp area which gives off a very different eerie vibe. The Grasslands is like the Great Plateau in Zelda Breath of the Wild, because it is here you learn all the basics and gain a good idea of how things work. The Grasslands prepares you for what lies ahead and introduces basic mechanics such as completing world intel, chocobo wrangling, minigames and more.
Throughout the game you get to explore lots of different terrains, all unique, designed very well, gorgeous and fun to traverse. If you don't want to backtrack later on, then be sure to exhaust an area before moving forward. A lot of the game, especially main story beats, is on rails, so it might be a very long time before you can return to a previous area. And even then, fast travel between regions must be unlocked through quests or other means.
Next, let's move on to talking about all the different stuff you can do within the game, because there is lots. Since a crafting mechanic has also been introduced in the form of the item transmuter, there's lots of natural resources to gather, and you have the new Chocobo Scent and Scour mechanic to help in this regard.
You remember everyone's favourite nerd Chadley, right? Well, this dork plays more of a dominant role in Rebirth. Chadley introduces World Intel, which is an umbrella term used to describe the optional activities that populate the open world. These activities can be completed to gain data points from Chadley, which are used to synthesize new materia and learn more about the region.
Remnawave towers are the only type of world intel that is initially available on the region map. Players need to activate the tower's control panel for it to unveil new world intel locations. Other points of interest must be discovered through exploration. There's excavation intel, where players can track down surveyable life springs by following spring seeker owls, which feels reminiscent of Ghost of Tsushima, where you can discover locations by following birds and foxes. Scanning life springs will reveal new historical and ecological data of the area, and often excavation sites that house transmuted chips.
There's also Divine Intel, which entails seeking out hidden sanctuaries that contain crystallized knowledge of summon materia. You have to complete a button input minigame to analyse them, which will strengthen the summon materia associated with them and will unlock a combat simulation challenge. Yes, Chadley's Combat Simulator is a returning feature from the remake that allows players to unlock and participate in combat challenges.
New challenges can be unlocked by using the assess materia on enemies and completing Fiend Intel. Fiend Intel challenges are straightforward combat encounters where my monster assessment instrument provides information about the target and sets 3 conditions to fulfill, which often include pressuring and staggering the enemy.
The regions of the world are huge and there is so much to do in each area. There's proto relics to find, cache locations to loot, chocobo chicks to follow, to repairable rest stops to gain golden plumes. And of course there's Chadley's tasks and world intel. And let's not forget about the mushroom shaped mog stools you can find. To gain access to the Moogle Emporium, you must complete a Moogle Mischief Roundup minigame contained within the Mogstool. Rebirth is minigames galore. There was a few fun optional minigames in part 1, but Rebirth has a lot more. Some of which are optional and some are compulsory, like in Costa del Sol to win companion tickets to purchase beachwear because apparently money doesn't work anymore.
There's a lot of minigames, so we're not going to list them here, but for those who are curious, we have already uploaded a video ranking the minigames from best to worst, so feel free to check that out. I will mention Queen's Blood though, a card-based minigame that joins the likes of The Witcher 3's Gwent and Machine Strike in Horizon Forbidden West. I hated Machine Strike. Gwent really grew on me, but I love Queen's Blood. Now that I understand it at least. If you're struggling to understand Queen's Blood, then I've uploaded a tutorial for that too. Hope it helps.
It can feel a little overwhelming to be sometimes bombarded by minigames, but a lot of them are really fun. There's definitely something here for everyone. Personally, I found Pirate Barrage quite addictive.
Explosion coming down the whole mountain. So where the hell's Shinra?
The remake placed a lot of emphasis on detail in setting the scene in Midgar, but Rebirth really focuses on getting to know the characters, gaining macro insights and developing the group's dynamics. There is a lot of character development in Rebirth. We see Cloud soften towards his companions and begin to genuinely care. And he smiles! It's a stark difference between the awkward, surly, solitary merc we saw in the remake.
Between his outbursts of crazy that is, since he's technically Sephiroth's thrall, which is something poorly explained in both games, but I'm sure part 3 will totally elaborate on this. Tifa doesn't get much development to be honest, but there was more of a focus on her in the remake. Barret, Red 13 and Aerith get a lot of development. We gain an insight into Barret's past and even get to see how he lost his arm and understand his hard persona a bit better.
I really enjoyed Barret's story. It's an emotional rollercoaster ride, and there's an actual rollercoaster ride. Well, kind of. It's a minecart ride really, but it's fun. We visit Red 13's hometown and are shown his Watcher origins, which segues into one of the best sections of the game where you visit the ominous Land of the Gi. It's an impressive interpretation of the source material. We also see a flashback of Aerith's arrival in Sector 7 with her mother, and it genuinely made me cry. It was so heartbreaking. Maybe it's because I have a daughter now, it hit quite hard.
Oh yeah, is that in this one? Oh, I forgot about that. It is sad though.
It is very sad.
It's so overly cruel too.
It is.
When everyone's like, I don't care about her. I don't know why they're John Wayne. Anyways, Aerith kicks the bucket.
Hey!
That is totally not a spoiler. Anyone who knows anyone who knows anyone knows she returns to the planet because the original scene is so infamous. I'm not sure I like the execution of this scene in Rebirth though. It just doesn't feel as shocking as it should, but maybe that's because we all knew it was coming. Players are also introduced to 2 new playable characters who joined as entourage of misfits with tragic backstories. There's Kate Sith, whose sole purpose is to annoy the player, push the narrative forward, and torture us with the most awful section in the whole game.
Then there's Yuffie, who was first introduced in the Intermission DLC for the remake and draws attention to the conflict in Wutai for those that care. But I personally can't stand Yuffie.
Neither can I. I despise this girl.
She's like an overly quirky, annoying, nerdy tag-along who crashes the party, ruins the group vibe, and isn't wanted or needed, but the other party members are too polite to tell her to sod off back to Wutai.
Cool.
Annoyingly, Yuffie is actually a strong party member and brings a really cool ability to the team, which is refreshing and tons of fun.
Square did that on purpose. There are a lot of returning side characters since the story has not yet been fully told. Zack makes more of an appearance in this installment since we only get a few seconds screen time at the end of the remake. Of course there's Sephiroth, who we do get to play as for a short time, which is cool. There's Madam N, Andrea, the Turks, Crazy Hojo, Rosh, Beck and his bandits, Kiri Kanan, Chadley, of course.
And Johnny! Good old Johnny, bless him. I love Johnny. He's hilarious in a pitiful, useless Muppet kind of way. It was nice to see the return of these characters and meet some new interesting additions, such as Bugenhagen.
Bless you.
Thank you. Sid, Billy, Dine, Dio, Vincent and others.
Finally, let's talk about the combat system, which expands on the active time battle, ATB, mechanic established in the first game. Rebirth adopts a lot of the same basic principles of combat from the remake, but is certainly a natural evolution of the foundations put in place.
You can once again freely toggle between 3 active party members, juggling a host of actions and abilities, including limit breaks. Party members must use normal attacks to build up their ATB gauges in order to execute other actions in battle, such as consuming an item, performing abilities, using summons and casting spells based on your character's allotted materia.
The combat feels more fluid and strategic than Remake, and it does feel like they have fine-tuned the system whilst expanding on it with the introduction of aerial combat and synergy abilities. Synergy abilities are tag team attacks that can be triggered and comes with a flashy animation, often granting temporary boosts to both participants.
Players can choose between 2 different combat styles at the start of the game. There's Classic, which is basically a boring, automated, normal attack spamming system with no strategy, or there's Active Combat, which is clearly the style that was intended for this game.
The combat system might feel bloated for some, especially those who are comfortable with Final Fantasy's classic turn-based routes, but once you get the hang of things, it's a very fun system. What isn't fun is understanding and using the Folios system, which is crucial for upgrading your party and ensuring you are well prepared for the combat challenges that lie ahead.
This system is so much worse than the skill system in Remake, which I never thought would be possible. Basically, as you progress and explore the world, you will earn skill points, SP, that can be spent customising each character's folio. Folios are basically skill trees that have branches, and you will need to spend SP to unlock the skill contained within. Most folios have several branches that span off from the main skill set, which are often specialisms for your character.
Folios are also tied to party level, and you will need to upgrade your party level through questing and building relationships to unlock new levels of each character's folio. This grants access to better upgrade options and rewards. So, should you play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth? If you have at least played Final Fantasy VII on PS1, or you have played the remake alongside watching a Final Fantasy VII story explained on YouTube, then 100% yes.
Despite Rebirth being seemingly divisive amongst nostalgia-blinded fans, trust me when I say there is never a dull moment in Rebirth, and even 60 hours into my playthrough, exciting new game-changing mechanics were still being introduced. Rebirth offers over 100 hours of gameplay and a main storyline that spans over 12 chapters and takes you to 7 huge different regions.
The story is a thrill ride full of twists and turns, and we will put our money on this one being Game of the Year. But who knows, the Game Awards are their own thing. Anyway, let us know what you think of Rebirth in the comments below. I've been Craig.
And I've been Heather.
This is Amalgamingle, and thanks for watching.